you ever do something really stupid? In my case, I just recorded like 75% of this show, went, I need to get a drink of water and sneeze, so I'm gonna turn my mic off, get a drink of water. No, I don't have to sneeze. Look down, my mic's on. So, I was talking that whole time with the mic off. So, for any of you who were watching that, that must have been pretty amusing. Me just making gestures at the camera, smiling, laughing, going, I think I made that face at some point. And of course I wasn't saying anything because I am a competent human being. So, I haven't recorded anything for a while. In part, that's just because, well, I go to Reed College. It's a school that's kind of known for two things. One is academic rigor, and one is Ren Fair, which is a 3-day-long party tied to all of the seniors turning their theses in. So basically, it's the only school so nerdy that it throws a party for dissertations, basically. And anyway, since we're a school of nerds, we want to be careful. So we've got this thing called Karma Patrol that brings water and bagels to everyone to make sure they don't get dehydrated, to make sure they don't get too hungry, because, you know, when people are partying, they lose track of those sorts of things. Anyway, to get on campus, you do 2 shifts of those if you're not a Reed student, or you pay $15. And I wasn't going to pay $15 when I could work 4 hours at the rate of $3.75 an hour. Clearly, that's a better decision. So, since my shifts were at like 1 in the morning, and since my friend had flown in from Vermont and brought his Vermont germs with him, I of course spent the whole time sick. So, instead of doing what I planned to do, which was corresponding with Gentleman Zeebly, doing joint vlogs, doing, you know, some duo streaming, maybe some 5 streaming. Instead, let's see, all of the League of Legends I played was on Twisted Treeline, because I was a little bit too sick to really want to do any ranked games, and I never really had enough people to do normals. I tend to either do, if I have 1 or 2 people, I'll go do ranked, and if I have 5, I'll do normals or ranked. And then, because I was sick, my voice was, you can probably still hear it, it sounds like I'm blah, blah, blah. But at the time, it was a lot sillier. I just didn't have the ability to express any sort of emotion that wasn't, I guess, Batman. So, my friend got here, and I got sick immediately, and we went on Karma Shift, and I thought, I am Batman! I deliver the bagels of the night! And then I went to the store, and I was like, can I have a chocolate bar? And I would play Galactic Civ, and I would think, I am the destroyer of worlds! Speaking of which, Galactic Civ 2 is like the best game. It's like Civ 4, but you're in space, which, you know, that's better than Civ 4, because everyone loves space. And you can build your own spaceships, and who doesn't like building their own spaceships? And then they blow each other up, and that's pretty awesome too. They blow up your enemies' spaceships, not yours. And it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek game. A lot of the abilities and ships are based off of other things. There's a terror star. It blows up star systems. And I'm pretty sure that was their only really original idea. But it's a very fun game. If you play on the immense map, it will take you a little while. I would say like 30 hours at least. And I guess that depends how much of a micromanager you are. Anyway, so then I played in a Dogs in the Vineyard campaign, and I was, of course, Rorschach, because Batman didn't quite fit. If you know what Dogs in the Vineyard is, you'll see why Rorschach is hilarious. I wasn't actually Rorschach, but I had the voice the whole time, and I was Brother Brutus, and it was very fun. But now I can talk, sort of. I think, again, it still sounds like I just woke up or something. That's how I had it described to me. But I'm good enough that I can re-record all the shows that I originally recorded and realized I sounded like I needed a throat lozenge. So, the 2 things that I ended up recording while everyone was here, the first one was something about learning. Like, that's what I'm going to talk about today. How to learn how to have correct opinions, and what having correct opinions means, and when that's important. And then the second thing I want to talk about, I'm just going to put it out here now because I've tried to put this in a bunch of shows. It's this article by Mike Flores about Magic the Gathering called Who's the Beatdown? And basically, it talks about aggressive early game decks versus passive late game decks and how their interactions work. And so from this, I've developed, I think, a methodology which you can use to very easily talk about team compositions and lane counters. So obviously, when I did my Meet the Lanes guide, I was like, oh, this is the perfect place to put this. Talk about lane counters now. Then I realized I really wanted to also talk about how the lanes interact. So I thought, okay, I'll wait till team comps and talk about that. So that's where I'm going to put it now, hopefully. Maybe I'll look at that and say, I can't really talk about it with team comps. Maybe I want to talk about it with, something even more complicated. But for now, I guess as homework, read this article. Google Who's the Beatdown, Mike Flores. It's a really, really strong article, and I think it has great applicability to games like StarCraft 2 or League of Legends. Just because it's obviously about Magic the Gathering, but it's such a general article that you can apply the idea of Who's the Beatdown to almost any game. I will give examples when I actually bring it up and talk about it in the show, but right now I am on a 30-minute clock and I want to get through everything I want to talk about. And re-recording everything is cutting into that time. So, now that I'm done explaining where I was, what I was doing, why, if any of you watched the live stream, there were 5 or 6 people. It was awesome. Why I sounded like Batman, and why I then didn't put that show up. And finally, to the one person who was watching the thing I just recorded, why I was going the whole time and not making any noise and flapping my lips, and I assume looking a little bit like a dunce. What I want to talk about today is the importance of being right as opposed to having been right. So I'm going to take the extreme example. The first example that comes to mind. There's a player called Ha-Shin-Shin. He's a very, very high elo player. I think he hovers around 1900 to 2000. He was around there, Season 1 as well. I don't want to say he pioneered it, but in the EU, there was this meta that went around for a while, which was Bruiser's Top. You might have heard of it. Where people would go top and build something on, say, Irelia, like Trinity Force, Warmogs, Atmas, and just for a while, people complained about how ridiculously overpowered tanky DPS were. And so, Ha-Shin-Shin, in the American meta, this hadn't caught on yet. So he was trying to tell people, hey, putting your AD carry top is terrible, because someone can just take Irelia, dump all over your AD carry, make them get no farm, be extremely tanky, still have good damage, and roll over your team, who's basically going to be in a 4v5. And so looking at it from the perspective of a player who had been following the EU meta, that person might be tempted to say, hey, I already know about this. I've been doing this for a long time. I have known about this, and I have been doing this. And that doesn't give you any advantage. If you get into a game now, let's say the double AP meta, and say, hey, my team's been doing double AP for 6 months now, or whatever. People are going to say, big whoop. That doesn't help you win your games now. And I think this is something that's really relevant to life in general. People want to have been right. They want to be able to point in the past and say, see, I've always had that opinion. If you look at politics, politicians who change their minds after being confronted with evidence or an argument are considered weak. They haven't stuck to their convictions. And while that may have some sort of validity in politics, it has no place in any sort of forum where the goal is self-improvement. Because it doesn't matter where you were, it matters where you are and where you're going. So, I want to give 3 examples that are kind of personal examples to me, and actually I said 3, it's actually 5. 3 types of examples where I want to sort of apply this sort of logic. The first is, if you've ever heard me... You guys aren't looking at anything interesting here. Here's the League of Legends client. Woo. Actually, solo tier list right here. In the future, I will just bring it to my face when I'm talking a bunch, but... if you look at the solo tier list, well, okay, if you know anything about me, there have been 2 champions that I have talked about forever as just being not the worst champions, but champions I never ever want on my team, because I feel like they don't contribute anything. There are actually more than 2, Katarina, Evelynn, that sort of thing, but the 2 champions I have hated for the longest time are Dr. Mundo and Mordekaiser. The reason being, I was seeing them from a perspective that I don't think to be correct anymore. Namely, that tanks are mandatory, and what a tank is a very specific thing. Someone who has a lot of CC, and builds generally tanky. So I was thinking of champions like Cho'Gath, Rammus, Shen, champions that can really protect directly your team. However, you've got champions like Mundo who are basically just health soaks. They kind of run in, and in my mind, any smart team would just not focus them, and everything would be okay. The problem is, they have the ability to jump on your squishy characters and kill them relatively quickly. Mundo doesn't have crazy damage, but AD carries don't have crazy tankiness. And so, looking from the perspective of a tank, I was thinking, Mundo's worthless. What's he gonna do? Run in and attack me? By the time he kills me, my team can kill the rest of his team. But, by the time he kills an AD carry, A, killing an AD carry is hugely important, and B, he can do it relatively quickly because AD carries are really squishy. Moreover, the reason he's actually moved up is he clears the jungle really quickly. But the point is, there were things about him that I didn't like, and I allowed those things to overshadow his entire kit. And then I saw my friend play him, ZBlue was playing him for a while, and I thought, well, okay, that kind of works, but we've only ever played it, when we're playing with our low elo friends or whatever. Maybe people just don't know how to counter Mundo. Well, I'd like to wager a guess that Elements probably knows how to counter Dr. Mundo. He just thinks he's a very solid pick anyway. And he's been getting a lot of high-level play. So that's not really an argument that I can go with in my head. Actually, not really another example. I'm going to go ahead and close this and just bring over the jungle tier list, where Stonewall also says Mundo is the #1 champion. So, there are 2 ways I could look at this. I could say, no, I don't like Mundo. Mundo is a bad champion, and I refuse to admit that he's right because I'm sticking to my guns. And what that would mean would be every team I play on, I would be against Mundo. If I were in solo queue and someone picked Mundo, I'd be like, oh, this jungler's bad. I shouldn't trust him. If I were in team, my team would either not pick Mundo and handicap themselves, or they would pick Mundo and I would kind of grumble about it to myself. And those aren't good options, because I'm not learning and I'm not accepting the way that the game changes. I still think Mundo has certain weaknesses that I don't particularly like. I tend to like CC heavy teams, but that doesn't mean that a champion like Mundo is bad. He actually does a lot of things, obviously, judging from those 2 tier lists, really, really awesomely. He clears the jungle so fast. Like, Shyvana can't counter jungle him. I imagine an organized team could counter jungle him, but he just blazes through the jungle, and he's only at low health for his first clear, and then he's, like, once he hits 6, in theory, he's never at low health in the jungle. Once he gets some spell vamp or some lifesteal, he's never at low health in the jungle. It's really just that first clear where he's a little bit weak, and even then he's not that weak. So the important lesson that I want to take away from this is sometimes I'm just going to be wrong, or I'm going to have the wrong priorities, and I need to be willing to change those in the face of new evidence, in the face of new whatever. Good, I have shifted that to the right place. Awesome. Sorry, I'm still a little sick, and my brain is in La La Land. So now I want to talk about a second type of thing where it's important to distinguish between having been right and being right. I have been complaining forever about Olaf top. Now, part of it is because I play crappy top champions like Nasus. My top champions are typically either extremely lane dominant or, just hold on and I'll be okay. And Nasus, actually, I think is stronger than people give him credit for, but he is crap against Olaf. And moreover, every champion I play, it turns out, is crap against Olaf. I like to play Udyr top. Udyr gets destroyed by Olaf. I like to play Renekton top. That matchup isn't terrible, actually. I like to play Nasus top. Ugh. I like to play Olaf top. Cho top. Ugh. All of these champions, Olaf just, walks up, throws his axes, E's you, picks up the axe, throws his axe again, and runs off. And you're like, what just happened? All I could do was, I'm Nasus. I just siphoning struck a minion during that time. I guess I could hit him, but my Q does like 7 damage at level 1, so why would I? If I don't farm up, I'd lose. And that constant damage coming out also isn't affected by, I think, the one mitigation strategy that is good on Nasus, which is starting Cloth from 5 pots. Because it's true damage, so he doesn't care. The 5 pots gives you some health, but that's really about it. He's going to be able to trade with you, because he's going to do the same thing. So I've just found overall that that's kind of a bad position to be in. So I've been complaining about this for a long time. We used to ban Olaf on and off, and everyone was like, why'd you ban Olaf? I don't understand that. We even scrimmed against some friends and banned Olaf, and they thought we were, like, specifically targeting someone that we knew played Olaf. We knew he played Olaf, but we just really don't like Olaf. Olaf was just a champion that destroyed me top for a long time. It destroys our current top. And I know there are counters to him. I just don't really know any of them that well, and when I do play them, I see that it's Olaf, and I still feel like, oh, I'm gonna lose, it's Olaf, I don't know what to do. So, recently, Olaf has moved up, like, crazy amounts over the past couple of weeks in tier list. Yeah. Dominating solo top for a while now, competitive bruiser pick, and he's, like, I just hate laning against him. And so, now that he's up there, I can say, hey guys, remember who always hated Olaf? Yeah, it was me. I knew what I was talking about. And that'll make me feel better, but it doesn't help anything. Now, the advantage to always having hated Olaf is I've seen Olaf a decent amount, and I kind of have an idea, don't play this champion, don't play this champion, don't play this champion. Renekton? Maybe. Teemo? That's sounding a little better. So, now that he's up here, and he's suddenly going to become Flavor of the Month, I'll see him every day, I'm so glad I'm not top anymore. We know what to do about him. So there is some advantage to having been right, but only if you have done something with that knowledge. Another example that I think relates to this is Trinity Force. For a long time, I have been removing Trinity Force from most of my champions that typically got Trinity Force. It started when I started doing it in the jungle. I just realized in the old jungle, it was okay to rush Trinity Force on Trundle. It was pretty good. Then the new jungle came out, and he didn't really have the money he needed. He didn't really, if you got a Trinity Force, it was so late that it was just pointless. So I started not getting it on him. And then I realized that I sort of felt the same way top. If I wasn't dominating lane top, and I got Trinity Force, I had a Trinity Force. I wasn't tanky enough to team fight. I had some damage. It was there, but it wasn't crazy. I didn't have any MR. I wasn't starting on any big items, and I had just spent 4,000 gold on something that was kind of good. I liked it. It gave me a lot, but Trinity Force isn't good because it gives you a whole bunch for the cost. It's good because it just gives you a lot of stuff because it costs everything. It's like the mothership in StarCraft. Yeah, the mothership is good, but how much did it take you to get a mothership? You got, Fleet Beacon. It's not like you were building carriers. Please tell me you weren't. and then you wait for like 76 minutes while the mothership builds, and that's with Chrono Boost. It's just not. It's most of the time, unless your late game is EVP, not worth it. And that's sort of how I started to see Trinity Force on more and more champions. And it's gotten to the point where the only champion I really regularly get Trinity Force on is Nasus. And I started thinking, well, what do I get from it on Nasus? I get that proc on his Q. Okay, so that proc gives me, let's call it 170 damage. That's about 50 Qs. Well, okay, 50 Qs. How much gold is that? That's 50. That's about 1,000 gold in minions. Well, all of a sudden, that doesn't look very attractive. I'm buying Sheen. I look at its stats and I get mana. Mana kind of sucks on Nasus, especially because I'm gonna get Frozen Heart. I'm going to have Shurelya's referee. I don't need the mana. I get AP from Sheen. AP's terrible on Nasus. So all of a sudden, like, I'm looking at it, I look at it more and more and I think, well, the Sheen proc is good, but Sheen isn't a good item for me. The proc the proc's awesome. The proc pays for itself so much, but everything else I'm getting from Sheen isn't good. I look at Zeal. Well, the move speed's nice. The crit chance, like, most of Nasus' damage comes from his Qs. You can crit the attack, but not the Q. The attack speed, pretty much useless. You look at Phage. Well, the AD is kind of useful. I guess it applies to your Q. The slow. Oh, that's awesome. Hang on a second. What am I getting from Trinity Force that I really like? It's actually Phage. So recently, I have experimented with, and right when I started doing this is when I stopped playing top, so I don't really have a conclusion in my head yet, but I stopped getting Trinity Force on Nasus, who's like the quintessential Trinity Force champion. And I've been getting Frozen Mallet, because it just makes me even tankier, and Nasus gets damage from his Q. He doesn't need it from anywhere else. And sure, Sheen gives you a decent amount, but if you look at how much that is, 170 every 2 seconds, that's 85 every second. All of a sudden that doesn't, 85 damage a second isn't something that's crazy strong on him when you can get so much more. Now, it is still good. If you compare that to an item like Sunfire Cape, it's basically, the passive on Sunfire Cape put on a single target. By which I mean the amount of damage it would overall give you on like 2 or 3 targets on a single target. So it's still something good, but the question is whether you can get something better. And like I said, I haven't really made that decision there, but the important thing is I've taken Trinity Force off of the builds of almost every champion I would normally get it, except for Nasus. And why? Because of all those reasons. So when I look at this tier list and I see, hey, as far as offensive physical items go, where's Trinity Force? Oh wow, it's behind a bunch of these items. Now, obviously, this means, like, most of these are just for AD carries. Because AD carries love being extremely damagey. But then I start looking at items that are on here that are just better than it, even for tanky DPS. Oh, Maw of Malmortius? Yeah, I guess that is good. It means that if you're a tanky DPS, the more focus you tank, the more focus you draw, because all of a sudden you're doing more damage. Oh, Atma's Impaler, the tankier you get, the more damage you do. Well, that's really good. Trinity Force, flat damage. Well, that's kind of good too, but it costs so much that getting there can be rough. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad item by any means. It gives you everything. And so, on most bruisers, that's actually really good. The problem is it costs so much that rushing it means you're not tanky, and getting it late means it doesn't do as much because a lot of what it does is based off of that flat effect, so it's not going to scale as well to the late game. I feel like it's an awkward item. It's still a very good item on anyone that can spam, but in this context, I can say, hey, I see that Trinity Force is tier 2. Why is that? Oh, well, I've already thought of all these reasons. I kind of don't like it. Maybe I can see why that's there. people have been valuing it so highly for so long, maybe it's actually even headed down further, and the reason it's up there is just because historically it's been such a strong item. Now, I don't actually believe that, because the only two real items that are below Trinity Force, and by real items I mean items that people regularly get, are Frozen Mallet and maybe Madred's Blood Razor. There are like two champions that get Gunblade. I haven't seen this since I was, playing normals at level 10. I don't think I've seen this ever. Does Blitzcrank get this, maybe? This is good, but it's a defensive item. That's why it's so low. Tiamat. None of these items are items that you ever see in games. So Trinity Force might be high up, but it's high up over a bunch of crap. Again, Frozen Mallet aside, Wriggles aside, and sort of these two items aside. Those are both very situational, though. So the fact that that is the case makes me feel like, oh, maybe I made the right choice, and in fact, maybe Trinity Force will start being valued less and less. Now, it's still incredibly valuable for all the reasons I've talked about, and for the fact that it's so much in one item, but I want to use the knowledge that I have about why I've stopped getting Trinity Force, and see if I can predict future trends from that. So this is an example where having had an idea about something, and then seeing more people have that idea is useful, because I can say, hey, I'm not the only one who sees this. Okay, this actually might be a thing. So the first case was just, I need to not think about, hey, was I always right? That doesn't matter. What I need to think about is, I want to be right now. The second one is, hey, I was right before, or at least starting to be right. What lessons can I draw from that? And the third option I want to give is that of, just because you do something and people don't like it, or don't highly value it, doesn't mean it's not good. So it's kind of the reverse case of this Mundo. For example, my strongest champion in solo queue is Tristana. I think Tristana is an awesome AD carry. She's mobile, she has a super strong early game, her mid game is kind of weak, but because of the strength of her early game, you often just skip over mid game entirely, especially in solo queue. And she has mobility, so again, in solo queue, she can really survive well. I have a feeling the reason she's so low is because in ranked play, you're going to have tanks and bruisers to protect you. However, that also opens up the option of you can run whoever you want. You don't need that sort of crazy CC to protect your AD carry if you're running Tristana. So in this case, I want to look at this and say, sure, Tristana's low on a tier list. What does that mean? Well, I play Tristana really well. My best win rates are Tristana. I'm not just going to stop playing Tristana, but I can look at this and say, hey, why are AD carries like Tristana so low? What can I do with that knowledge? How can I start thinking about my play with Tristana, my arranged team's team comps with Tristana? How can I look at all of those things and make future changes to how we play to accommodate this? So again, I'm not looking at, am I right? I'm looking at, or sorry, was I right? I'm looking at, am I right? And what can I do to benefit from that? You always want to be looking not at who's right, not at who was right. You want to look at getting the best opinions for yourself and figuring out how you can use them to make your gameplay better. Awesome, 8 minutes early. I've cut this short. Hopefully by Monday I will have a normal person's voice entirely back again. I want to talk about team compositions on Monday, and since I've been so far behind, on Tuesday I want to talk about lane counters. I might switch those up. I haven't really figured out which order they go in, but I think team comps is the important one to talk about, because a team of all lane counters that's just a terrible team comp isn't going to do well. Like Garen, LeBlanc, anyway, a bunch of early game champions. Just because they're all going to counter in lane doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a win, and that's ultimately what matters. Yeah, so I think I want to talk about team comps, what it's necessary to have a good team comp, and on Tuesday I want to talk about lane counters, what makes a lane counter, how to take advantage of lane counters, how to pick your other lanes based off of lane counters, and that's where I want to bring in the whole beatdown discussion. But moreover, on Wednesday I think I want to catch up on my champion guide, so I'm going to try and do Cho'Gath, and how's this? Since it's been so long for this champion guide, I'll have something special coming out with the guide. Something that makes me look a little bit silly. Alright, I've got people moving into my house to play a game, and I don't want to be talking over them, so I'm Gentleman Gustav, and this has been learning and how to learn from being right.